Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to talk about contingency contracts. This is the last section in the differential reinforcement module, and this is the last way that we can utilize differential reinforcement to modify behavior. It's also probably the easiest topic in this module. So we're going to understand what a contingency contract is and what its purpose. So it's a written agreement between the client and the staff that outlines a specific behavior, the criteria for success, and the reinforcer to be earned. Because we include a reinforcer or some sort of contingency at the end of this of whatever they're supposed to do, we would put this in differential reinforcement rather than antecedent interventions. However, if this is just rules and there's no contingency at the end, then that would be more along the lines of priming or the visual schedules that we talked about earlier. You're going to, learn how to write and implement one. So identify the behavior, choose the meaningful reinforcer, set realistic criteria, write it in simple language, review it with the learner, and then post it or store it where it's visible. You're going to have a clear description of target behavior, the measurement criteria, the reinforcer, signatures of all parties. And then we'll talk about kind of the common mistakes people make when doing this and how to work through them. A contingency contract is a written agreement between a learner and staff, parent, or teacher that outlines a specific behavior, the criteria for success, and the reinforcer. This is also known as a behavioral contract. We utilize these because it increases accountability, it helps with self-management, it helps with independence, and it will create really clear expectations, and it will create buy-in because this guarantees that you've talked to them through the contract and they know exactly what they need to do. And then they also get to put input into the contract. So if they think it's too difficult or they want to change something, you include their input and modify it as needed. There's a couple things that a learner needs to be able to do before you can utilize this with them. The first is they have to have an understanding and agree to the expectations. So there has to be enough communication between the two of you. That doesn't mean it has to be speaking. It can be alternative forms of communication where you can communicate what is in that contract. They also have to be able to understand the goal and why we're doing the behavior. We don't typically do this with a brand new behavior. It should be a behavior that they've seen before and they've done before. It's not something that we're in skill acquisition with. We've already seen them engage in it. So a really good contingency contract will have the clear description of the target behavior. So with what it is and what it isn't, measurement criteria, how you're measuring it, the reinforcer, the consequence of them engaging in the behavior, signatures of all the parties, a date, a review schedule, and possibly some visuals to help them remember. And here's a sample of this. If Johnny finishes his math worksheet with fewer than 2 prompts before 2 p.m., then he will earn 10 minutes of iPad time. And this includes a visual checklist and a progress tracker within this. And the signing's really important. You will be surprised on how much when you sign something and then your student, your learner also signs it, how much that helps behavior. It's essentially, we're really just priming here or using a visual to show them what they need to do. But signing it is, it's an agreement to do it. I've really rarely had kids not engage into the behavior on a contingency contract. So that's really important to keep in mind that signature means a lot. And they don't have to, if they're not writing, sign their name. There's lots of ways you can do this. You can have them write the first letter of their name. You can have them, put their fingerprint. There's all sorts of ways to do this. Why would we use this? Well, it increases accountability, holds the learner responsible for meeting the specific behavioral goals. It builds self-management and independence. It teaches the learner to monitor their own progress and earn reinforcement. It reduces misunderstandings because you have this contract and you're both clear on the expectations. And if there is, you can go back to the contract and review it. And it encourages buy-in. It involves the learner creating ownership of their own behavioral change. So when would we use these contingency contracts? The first is when the learner can understand and agree to the expectation. You need that sort of communication in some way with your learner. It ensures the learner has the cognitive and verbal skills to comprehend and commit to the contract terms. Again, the verbal skills can be alternative verbal skills. It does not have to be speaking. The behavior needs consistent reinforcements. Whatever you're putting in that contract, you have to be able to deliver in some way. If you can't deliver it, don't put it in a contract. You're going to be held to the contract in the same way the learner is. It would be unethical to write up a contract that you can't fulfill with your learner. And then teaching responsibility or goal setting. So if your learner is getting to a point where they could engage in goal setting and they're taking more responsibility over their behavior, this is the perfect time to include a contingency contract to formalize that process. And then behavior occurs in multiple settings. You want to start with a behavior that they've already done in other settings and that it's fairly easy for them to engage in the behavior. The components are a clear description of the target behavior, and this needs to be observable, measurable. It needs to be an operational definition with onset, offset, also what the behavior is and what the behavior isn't, how we're measuring it, how will we know that the person engaged in that behavior, how often and by when the behavior needs to occur, and then identify a motivating reward or consequence that will be provided contingent on the behavior. What are they going to earn when they engage in that behavior? Everybody signs it. It's super important. Also, caregivers should sign it as well, because if you're not there to deliver a reinforcement, whoever might deliver a reinforcement needs to sign it. And then there has to be a time where we're going to review this, make sure that this is still working for the student and in the environment and all the caregivers. Okay, so here's another sample. We have a couple of these. The agreement made on this date, the person agrees to complete all homework assignments before 8 p.m. without needing reminders, Monday through Friday. If this behavior occurs on at least 5 out of 5 school days during the week, the person will earn 30 minutes of extra screen time on Friday evening. Both parties agreed to the terms. The reward will only be provided if the specific behavior and conditions are met, and the contract is intended to encourage responsible behavior and promote positive reinforcement. And that's for a child who is reading at a high level, but you can make this a lot more simple. Here's another example. A student agrees to remain in their seat and raise their hand before speaking during math class. If this behavior is observed on 4 out of 5 school days, the student will earn lunch with a friend on Friday. Here's another one. The student will complete morning chores, make bed, feed dog, brush teeth. See, they wrote it out exactly what it is. If you just wrote morning chores, there could be some disagreement on what morning chores are. Before school day each day without reminders. If completed for 5 consecutive days, they'll earn a trip to the ice cream shop. The client agrees to use respectful language with peers during group sessions. If no appropriate language is used during all sessions for 1 week, they'll earn 10 extra minutes of free time on Friday. When we write these, we start by clearly identifying the behavior you want to target and make sure you use observable, measurable terms. Then we also have to choose a meaningful reinforcer that the learner will find motivating, such as a preferred activity, tangible item, or access to a privilege. To make sure that those are meaningful, you need to do those preference assessments. And then you need a realistic, clear criteria. Determine the specific conditions under which the learner will earn the reinforcer, how much, how often, and what time. It has to be something attainable for that person. You want to start small. So all those examples I gave you, you might want to start with one day and then spread it out to the optimum amount of behavior to earn the reinforcer. You want it simple and student-friendly language, so concise, easy language that your student can understand. And then you want to review it with the learner, any other caregivers or stakeholders involved in that behavior, and make sure everyone understands, agrees, and believes it's attainable. So I've seen these written and the students like, oh, that's going to be hard, like doing chores every single day. And so take into account how they're feeling about it, and you might want to modify it based on that. No matter what, you want them to be successful. So making it too difficult isn't going to help that. And the second they're not successful with these, it kind of just disappears. Like they're not even thinking about it anymore because they're not earning anything. And then you want to put it somewhere visible, but keep in mind their confidentiality. Like in a classroom, I wouldn't post these two out in the open, but it has to be somewhere where the person who would deliver reinforcement and anyone else involved and the learner all can see it and access it at any time. Most of the time when you're moving into these contracts and utilizing them with learners, they can actually choose their own reinforcers at this point. So you can involve the learner in selecting reinforcers they find motivating within reasonable limits. So you might have to do preference assessments. You might be able to just do a reinforcer survey. Use preferred activities, tangibles, or privileges. Choose reinforcers that the learner generally really enjoys. Use a menu options. So the older the learners get or the more they grow developmentally, you can start providing more options where they're choosing. I definitely move into menus of reinforcers with older learners. Reinforcers should be available immediately. So as soon as they've met their contract, they should immediately get that reinforcer. Learners have to have a say in the contract to feel a sense of ownership. It's super important. Let them choose how to track progress. So if you can involve them in the tracking of the progress, giving themselves check marks or smiley faces, some sort of checklist. Provide positive feedback on effort, not just outcomes. Even if they don't meet it, highlight what they did right and how they can keep doing better. If it's like over a week, then each time they do engage in the behavior, you want to make sure that there's praise and other types of reinforcement available to them. You want to track their performance daily and make sure it's working. If it's not, you may need to go back to the drawing board and review the contract regularly. After they get their reward, review this and make sure it's still working. If they did a week of chores and they don't meet that at the very end, you might want to go look at the contract again and see how can we make them successful. You want to adjust the criteria based on progress, and you want to fade the contract gradually, moving to delayed reinforcement or your natural reinforcement. These are the most common pitfalls when writing these contracts. The first is vague behavioral goals. Go back and make sure these are observable, measurable. Just do your morning chores isn't going to work. Tell them exactly what they need to do. If it's too difficult or unrealistic, you want to look at small, achievable goals. Make it smaller. Make them have to do it less to earn their reinforcement. The reinforcer is not motivating. You have to conduct a new preference assessment. If you have inconsistent follow-through, you want to use timers, checklists, and reminders. And then unclear expectations. Involve the learner in setting the contract. Make sure they know what you want them to do. And then failure to review or update, you just have to schedule meetings and make sure that you engage in all the stuff that you need to do to check in and make sure it's working. So this is a simpler one for a younger child who may not be as verbal as those other ones I gave you. But what will I do? Turn my homework in time. I would make that a little bit more clear. What time is it? Turn in homework, everything that was due, just to make sure, based on this, if they turn in one page when they typically have two, that would still count there, I think. Maybe that's acceptable. They have 2 pages of homework and we're just going to work on them turning in 1 page. That's fine, but just make sure it's really clear. by when 3 times this week. That's good. And they'll earn pizza night on Friday, and then we would all sign it. You can make these super simple for younger, less communicative children. Okay, so wrap-ups and key takeaways. Contingency contract helps promote clear expectations and independence. It's a clear agreement between clients and staff on expected behaviors, criteria for success, and reinforcement. The contracts must be written in simple, concrete language, use observable, measurable terms to describe target behavior and criteria, and avoid vague and unrealistic goals. Involve the learner in every step, so you want to make sure they're discussing the goals and reinforcers and how you're going to track the progress. This creates ownership of success. Review and adjust contracts regularly to modify the criteria based on the learner progress, and then use contracts to bridge self-management. They're way more in control of these contracts. From that point, you can go to where they're self-monitoring their own behavior independent of you or any other caregivers. Okay, thank you. Good job on this module. I'll see you in the next module.